Hey guys, what's up? Roshi here. We've got some exciting balance changes. Just to kick things right into it, I want to keep this video short and sweet. We're going to go through the changes, I'll give my hot takes, and then we'll discuss at the end how this is going to affect the meta. So, Throne Room has been slaughtered. I guess you can use it to buff heroes now, but losing that Aegis is huge. That's what made this card great. You could protect it, and it basically would give you just permanent Aegis for the rest of the game, which was hard to deal with. And I'm not sure buffing heroes is going to make up for losing that, but the effect of getting a 7/7 Daraka and a 6/12 Eileen eventually is still strong. Definitely going to see less random aggro decks slapping this into their deck, but we'll see. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. A lot of the cards that went into Throne Room decks were not heroes, so that's kind of a non-bow there. I can't think of any off the top of my head that actually ping anymore. Like, they were using Auto Tread, or they were using, like, random Grenadin that pinged and stuff like that, so these Throne Room decks are going to be completely different. Fear got a slight buff, still think it's mediocre. I tried it out in a Reanimator deck, and it just really wasn't worth the slot. But maybe being a 7/7 makes it better. I don't know. I don't really see how this changes anything. I think the problem was it didn't discard enough, and even though like this body is great, it doesn't really do anything as a unit, so I don't know. Kilo got a pretty significant nerf. I'm kind of upset that Kilo is allowed to be a 1/4, but Marius Mandrake can't even be a 0/4. Like, hello, Direwolf? What's happening here? Pay 3 and exhaust, so it's going to cost... Basically, these Kilo decks can't pop off till turn 5, instead of previously when they would curve Merchant turn 3 into turn 4 Kilo. That's a pretty big nerf. Slowing them down even a turn is just fantastic, so... we'll probably see less Kilo decks, or the ones we see will be more value mid-range decks than decks just looking to, like, here's my champion on turn 4, deal with it. Oh, you can't? Cool, I win. Dicro got a massive buff. Dicro is going to be a very huge, like, as a 4-cost 3/5, this is ridiculous. I'm definitely happy to see this change. This is going to make a lot of interesting decks with like Zumok Shaman way more viable, because you can curve Conqueror straight into Shaman, which is fantastic. And just like Valkyries in general, I'm happy to see this. I have the premium versions of this guy just because of how fantastic this art is. Very happy to see Dicro getting buffed here. Severin got a massive buff. I think this is important. It used to cost, you had to add like 5 Shadow pips for him to do anything. Now you're more likely to see your Star Reader Severin coming back into play more consistently, and it becomes a much better one-drop for like Rat decks, like anyone playing Rat NATO or any sort of Relic deck. Happy to have Severin in there, maybe even in a Throne Room deck, for example, or if you're playing Crown, which kind of goes hand in hand with Throne Room. Monitor got a pretty good buff. Just costing 1 less makes this start to become a lot more interesting. Parapet Sentry got a huge buff. Being able to kill Helena is massive. Definitely can expect to see more fire decks that look to go a little bigger than just like 1-drop, 2-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop, 3-drop, you're dead, you know. So that's exciting. It's nice. Like, I'd rather die to a mid-range deck any day than an aggro deck that's just like, I dumped my hand, are you dead? Milo's got a pretty significant nerf. Not having Overwhelm means that you can just, like, chump block it with random crap, which makes Milos a whole lot easier to ignore and deal with in general. Unfortunately, you know, Golem got nerfed, so... one of the main functions of Milos of being able to like shut off golems is kind of gone too. But you know, I'm always happy to see aggro get nerfed. I find it frustrating to play against. I always thought Milos kind of did too much, and dying to his firebombs just felt really bad. So being able to slow this rate down is great. He's also really good at pressuring people that have lots of Aegis, so being able to just like chump block and protect your Aegis is pretty huge. And if you're playing a life gain deck now, you don't just like auto lose because of a Milos, which is great because you can block it. Dawnwalker got a pretty significant buff. Not really sure how much that changes, only costing 2 pips instead of 4. I didn't really think it was that hard to get 4 time pips, but maybe this changes things. But honestly, I don't... Functionally, it's still the same Dawnwalker, in my opinion, but maybe it's a little better. Field Medic got... looks like a minor buff. I think its contract used to cost 3, now it costs 2. So... Let me confirm that real quick. I've got the nerfs on the other page. Let's see. Field Medic. Yeah, I don't know why they're circling this. Maybe the contract went down 1. It did get a buff and attack, which is interesting. It might make it maybe a viable card in like Javon decks now, just being like a more efficient beater. It attacks for 4 if they've got blockers, so that's cool. Tinker Overseer is a 2/2 now. I don't think that changes much. Sea of Teeth costs 1 less. This will make it a much more interesting hate card against Combri Relics, which already barely exists. Maybe against like Rat NATO decks. I don't know. It's weird. There's not a lot of time decks that both don't play Relics and want to kill Relics, but it's interesting for sure. Could be good tech against like Permafrost decks. Silverblade Intrusion got another nerf. I'm very happy about this. I've always thought Kiro was way too overtuned. Now there will be no more surprise 3/3s just entering the board and like, here's my 1-cost spell, I draw 2, my units don't die this combat, your relic weapons suck, get good scrub, oh by the way here's a 3/3 because why not? That seems like a pretty high rate for 1 mana of just, I win combat, I draw cards, I make a 3/3, and I get random bullcrap in my hand to like mark it away. So it did too much. I'm glad to see it get turned down. I still think it's ridiculous, but at least now it's 1 line of text less ridiculous. Ice Bolt can't be negated or stopped by Aegis. That's interesting. I love that. This is going to make Ice Bolt a lot better. Very cool to see more cards like that. Excited to play with it. Sorry, I'm just low-key dying here, so mute the mic and cough. Molder Muck, it's been nerfed. You can no longer play it in even-handed Golem decks. Yes, I'm joking. But this will make it a much more viable option for Throne decks to like kind of counteract aggro and stuff, which is nice. Twisted Farmer got a pretty significant buff. Being a 2/3 means that it's like actually able to razzle dazzle in combat on its own. Before, when it was 1/3, it was honestly kind of trash. So it was only good in like niche supply lines decks, and even there it was questionable. So I'm happy to see this get a rate even at the cost of being harder to cast, because 2 Shadow really isn't too hard for Shadow decks anyway. The Rat King, that's a pretty huge buff. I always thought that card was a little overcosted for what it did. So now it's going to come down a lot earlier and be a lot more interesting of an option. As a 4-drop, to me, it just felt bad. So happy to see that one. Archerport Sewers. Your rats and rogues have +1 when you start your turn at night. Okay, so it just got a nice little buff there. I like this. Yeah, not a whole lot else to say. I already liked this card back in the day, but it's definitely gotten a little slower. But now you could curve like a Rat King right into Archerport Sewers, and that's actually a pretty interesting curve. I like that. You could be playing Rat Cage as well, and just be the Rat God. Shout out batteries. Anyway, Pock got a nerf. Happy to see Yetis get turned down. There were so many disgusting lines where they were just like filled their whole board and then just played like Wumps in the site and like the other Anthem guy. and you'd just be dead before you could even do anything, especially if you're on the draw. So slowing them down even like 1 pip is huge. Now like 3-2s won't let you just play Poc Poc for free, which is great. Alessi, I think, got a buff. Pretty sure. Oh yeah, it was a 1-1, now it's a 2-2. It's actually pretty significant. She's a hero too, which is cool. Maybe we'll see more Cobra. Goliath Axe got a much needed buff. As a 4-4, it was just like, what do you even do with this? Like, there's so many good like 4-cost 4-4s and 4 like etc. that you couldn't even kill with the axe and like keep your axe around. So that's cool to see. Derry got a pretty significant buff, losing even 1 cost. This is a great defensive option, and being able to attack for 4 eventually is huge too. Love to see this. Explorer Dinosaur is actually very important typing. There's lots of cards that interact with both Explorers and Dinosaurs, so now either of those factions or even a hero deck has a very, very strong 1-drop play to kind of slow the gas down of aggro decks while having it be a very reasonable threat later on in the game once you've played some spells. Transform a unit or relic into a 2-1 fresh recruit. What is different about this? Mandatory. Oh, you can transform your own stuff now. Okay, I mean, I don't really know what to say. I guess that's a buff, but the slightest of buffs, which is fine. When a player plays a spell directly on Delph, sacrifice him to invoke. And before... Oh, he's got lifesteal now. Okay, that's huge. That is actually huge. Now, like, your opponent actually has a reason to want to kill it, because if they're aggro, like, they're not going to want to race Delph. I'm happy about this. This is going to make Xenon better, and I like Xenon, if you didn't know. Deal 4 damage to an enemy unit with flying. That's pretty good. They're really trying to hate on flyers right now, and I'm happy with that. This used to cost 4, and now it costs 2, so that's a lot more reasonable. We're going to see more Helenas popping. The cool thing about this is this has Overwhelm, so if you're like going after like a 2/2 bird, that's actually 2 points of damage or a way to pop Aegis, so that's pretty interesting. Know Thy Enemy got a pretty significant side grade, I would say. As far as like killing the board and like playing 1 unit, it's still exactly the same, except now the rate of being able to like wipe the board against aggro comes down a turn earlier, which I think is important, and the rate of amplifying got a little worse. So, you know, it's going to cost 1 more pip than it usually would have for that second amplify, and then 2 more, and then 3 more. So you'll see less even Argenport decks. Obviously, because of the next nerf, you'll see less even Argenport decks, but it won't be so free for them to just like fill the board in the late game for no reason. Golem got a pretty significant nerf. I think this is good. What I have to say about Golem is, as someone who's played the crap out of Golem, you've seen me with even World Pyre decks, you've seen me with even Mandrakes, like showing up to tournaments and like crushing and just playing Golem for so long. And the reason is just we don't have a card that is on this power level that like is able to fill your hand. Like the closest we get is Strategize, but Golem can block. Like, that's just huge. It gave you so much consistency that it almost felt bad if you're trying to play a mid-range or control deck without Golem, because your opponent would just outvalue you almost arbitrarily and like fill their hand with exploits and just be picking apart your hand, like slamming like lots of interaction, and they'd just be up on cards. And the downside of only being able to play 0s, 2s, 4s, 6s, and 8s was very minimized. Like, you could play crap like Tomaries, and like the shift cost was 3, so it really wasn't. And just there's so many good cards in Throne that it led to lazy deck building, honestly. And sometimes games came down to who drew more golems, which is not a good feeling. This is going to lead to, 1, less people playing golem, and 2, a lot more agency in deck building. Like, now you're gonna, like, let's say you're a shadow deck, like my Mandrakes or something. I'm not gonna just slam 4 golems and 4 devours and call it a day. Like, I'm gonna actually think about, like, how am I going to get advantage? Is it through Mandrake? But it can't just be Mandrake, so maybe I play Tazboos. I can't just, like, slam golems in my deck and call it a day. Like, oh, there's my card draw. That's all I need. Like, move right along. You know what I mean? And because opponents can't do that either, it levels out the playing field. And now, like, I honestly love the design of Golem. I wish they had pushed it further by giving us more cards. But since it didn't happen, I think the days of, like, fighting over golems is gone. You're going to see a lot less Golem hate cards, like open contracts everywhere and stuff like that. Now, to get onto the changes, being a 2-2 that replaces itself, strong, not bad. Not as insane as being a 2-2 that puts you up a card, but it's still good. And being able to play a 2-cost 4-4, that's insane. We don't really have much else that even compares. So, Golem may still be viable, but it'll be a lot different. Ancient Defenses getting a massive buff here, dealing 4 instead of 3. You know, at 3 cost, you really want your Torch to do a little more damage, so love to see this change. Sentinels will be really happy. I think this is the second time this card has gotten buffed. It used to be 4 cost, deal 3. Now it's 3 cost, deal 4. Love to see this. Bullseye, I guess Fire just gets to have all the best attachment hate. This is kind of disgusting. Before, it would only kill, what, 2 cost relics? Now it's just any. I don't really understand why they're giving Fire so much relic hate. Maybe that's its, like, Keller faction. But it is what it is. It could be a decent control option, too, now. Kind of sad for me, as I've been playing a lot of decks with, like, Crackling Bauble recently. And, it's going to be a whole lot less free now that there's better relic hate rolling around. This also can kill, like, a Mind Break trap or something, so that sucks. Whereas before, Fire really had no way to deal with stuff like that. League Explorer got a pretty significant nerf. Instead of making multiple depth charges, it just buffs the one you have, so you can just pop it and you won't just die arbitrarily. And costing another pip is pretty important, so that's great. Yeah, and one other thing to keep in mind with League Explorer is, I guess this is kind of an indirect nerf to End of an Era, which was one of the few ways to cleanly deal with League Explorer. But honestly, from my experience from testing End of an Era, it wasn't always enough. Sometimes you would die before, like, you could even cast it, or you didn't have it. And yeah, so definitely happy to see this change. Make Relic hate good again, I guess. The only unfortunate thing is, one of the things I loved about League Explorer is how good it was at for enabling relic sacrifice strategies and just giving you a big pile of relics to work with. I think it's unfortunate that instead of dealing with, like, what I consider to be the more frustrating part of the card, which is how much damage it does, is instead of nerfing that, they nerfed how many relics it makes, which was, in my opinion, the actually cool part of the card. You know, maybe they could have made it so that the relic depth charge only deal 1 damage or something. because then you can still use it in, you know, kind of the deck it was. Maybe not mainly. Maybe it was designed as an aggro card, but I always loved that you could use cards like Rust Grafter, I think, and Lethrai Lobotomy and stuff like that, and the 2-drop guy that sacrifices relics. I think it's a slime or an ooze or something. I loved the synergy this had with those cards. And I love, like, synergy cards like this. So I hate that, like, because aggro was too good, they nerfed it. I wish they would have nerfed it in a way that, like, made those interesting synergies still possible without, you know, having aggro decks just, like, slam this as a 4 of in every single aggro deck from now on. But, you know, maybe this tunes it down a little bit. We'll see. Illuminator getting a buff here. Not sure what it was before. Go ahead and consult the archives. It used to be a 4 cost, and it only gave +2/+2. As a 3 cost, this is interesting. I guess you, like, play, like, a 1 cost spell or something, like I guess like a Bullseye, for example. Slam this, gain some life, get a 5/5 with Overwhelm. That seems good enough for Expedition, in my opinion. It's not a hero or anything, but seems fine. Also gives you some good redundancy with Javon. Well, I guess you're not really playing that many spells in your Javon deck, so who knows. Cloud Scraper getting a pretty significant change here. Being a 5 cost is huge. Being able to put enemy units with flying and deal with those instead of just 2-drops. This is a pretty big change. Maybe Time is getting the push it needs to be viable. I tested out like a big Time deck, and one of the things I noticed is that even with how many killer cards I'd have, like, there just wasn't enough ways to deal with all of the flyers. There wasn't enough ways to deal with just, like, really important threats like Zoltan Ambassador or whatever, or like Wump or whatever, and eventually you just fall behind because your threats just weren't good enough, your value wasn't good enough, your removal wasn't good enough. So yeah, love to see this change. Arcanum Seeker Ultimate, when you gain health, Arcanum Seeker gets +4 attack. This is exactly the same. What did they change? Arcanum... Oh, it has Overwhelm. Okay. That's interesting. I don't really see what that changes, but I'd rather have it have, like, Aegis or, like, Flying or something, but we take those. Kickflip Monk is now... Oh, okay. So it's a 1/4... It's a 2/2 on your turn, and it's a 2/4 with Flying on the enemy turns. This is great. This will now block Helena a little better, and it blocks aggro a little better. Very nice change. Throne Warden is even now. Whoa. As a 5-drop, this was kind of medium, but as a 4-drop, this slaps. I'm not sure if this is good enough for Throne, but this is about as good as it's going to get. Maybe this brings back those Dezo's Workshop decks. Not sure, but very interesting. You may give another unit unblockable this turn, or the enemy player sacrifices a relic of their choice. So... Huh. So this is now a 4/4 that makes the enemy sacrifice a relic. That's actually really good. Dang. I like that. And you can also just randomly use it for lethal sometimes. This is very interesting. And I think this is an expedition too. Oh, I like that. Ramba's challenge got a buff. It definitely needed it. Maybe as a 2-drop, this is viable. Even just like 2-cost invoke, like, is decent. Pull from duty, getting a minor buff here. I think it was +1/+1 before. I like to see this. Just making all of the invoke cards better of the ones that were bad. Stolen augmentation? What happened here? Oh, okay. So as long as one person has a unit, you can play this, which is cool. Whereas before, you needed both players to have a unit. That's interesting. Curiox's Hunt being 3 cost is pretty big. That might actually make this playable. The Oni Patrol now like dies to pings all the time, which is great. Aggro is really annoying for a while, so it's nice to see it toned down a little bit. Call to Hit is fast. That's pretty nice. Now that's going to tone down cards like League Explorer or Houndmaster. And, ooh, Torgov's Wares is 2 cost. That might, you know, like this card was made and like it's not even a fast spell, and it was just like, why would you ever want this over Wisdom of Elders? But maybe it's a little better now as a 2-drop because you can use it as a discard outlet and a discard tool without really feeling too bad about it. So we've gone through all the changes. What I expect to see going forward is Throne is going to be shaken up in a big way. No more even Argenport. You know, no more like even Xenon. Even like the decks like that you've seen me playing recently, like even Worldpire, even Mandrakes, like, you know, those are gone now. Which is going to open the way for a lot of brewing to happen and a lot of change and fluctuation, I imagine, as people start to find out how to build mid-range again without just slamming even-handed Golem in it. And who knows, maybe Golem's good enough now as a 2-cost 4/4 or occasionally a 2/2 that draws you a card that, like, maybe we'll still see some even decks, but this is going to shake things up in a big way. I'm happy to see it. Some highlights, I think Dicro Conqueror is amazing, and some very interesting things. Least favorite change, probably Bullseye getting the buff. I don't like that my opponent in like Fire has like just a main deckable removal spell like Bullseye that can also kill a Stormhold Plating or a Crackling Bauble. Like, that's ridiculous. That doesn't need to be a thing. But, you know, like if they're gonna have it be like a 1-cost Relicate, it shouldn't also be an efficient burn spell. That's just my 2 cents. Maybe it's because I like playing big clunky relics. But that aside, there's going to be a lot of feels bad moments where you're like spending the whole game trying to develop this big relic and getting blown out by a 1-cost spell that they'd be main decking in their deck anyway. Not ideal. Kind of my same reason for not liking the new 3/1 that kills relics. Just something that you'd already be playing anyway can also kill relics because why not? That level of relic hate and redundancy is not something I think Fire needs to have when it's already as good as it is. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm excited to brew. Definitely a lot of decks you'll see coming from me. I am going on vacation next week, so I won't be able to like dive right into it with everyone else. But when I get back, there will be brews aplenty. So keep an eye out for when I'm live. Thanks for watching, guys.